Good morning. My name is Harold O'Grady. I'm a reference librarian at Brooklyn Law School, and I'm co-presenting here with Lloyd Carew-Reid. I'll let him introduce himself when he has his time. The point of this project is my personal excitement for a program that has been around at Brooklyn Law School for a few years and has been evolving. And that's what we really wanted to present today. And as we're here at Harvard Law School, which has, well, what shall we say, one of the highest placement rates and probably doesn't have a lot of problems getting its students legal jobs, that's really not the reality for a lot of law schools throughout the country. Certainly, Brooklyn Law School has encountered a lot of difficulty in placing its students in legal jobs after they graduate, and that's probably true of law schools throughout the country. So since the financial collapse of 2008, that's probably been going on to this very day. In fact, yesterday there was an article in the National Law Journal about how the legal market is having a real hard time placing graduates of the class of 2013, which is really the largest ever. I think the stats were, and they are a little bit different than the ABA stats, is that rates are down to about 84% placement rate, which sounds kind of high, but that's from a higher number in 2007 of 91% placement. So I think what we've all seen is the contraction of the labor market, maybe some shrinking of law school enrollment, and its impact on legal education. So there's some really good news, and that's why I was really excited to talk about this presentation today, which is about the Brooklyn Law Incubator project and the CUBE project, which is the Center for Urban Business Entrepreneurship, which is really headed by Jonathan Askin, a professor at Brooklyn Law School who joined the law school in 2008. I believe that's the year that the Blip Clinic started, just in time for the financial collapse. So I don't really want to talk too long. I'm not really the star of the show. I'm just really facilitating presentation of the faculty and the students who are bringing a new direction to legal education. And that's really in keeping with the theme of this project, of this program, CALI Convention this year, which is the next wave. And I think that is really the next wave of legal education. We're moving on from traditional case law education to deal with how do we get young lawyers jobs, how do we turn them into entrepreneurs, legal entrepreneurs, where they're creating their own jobs rather than sitting back and waiting for the big white shoe law firm to give them this big six-figure job. So I don't really want to take too much time. I think you see there are a lot of screens up in front of you. This presentation would not be possible without some technology, and that's why it's Lloyd as the information technology instructor at Brooklyn Law School, and I am co-presenting, and I'm going to turn it over to Lloyd.
Thanks, Harold. So Harold came to me a couple of years ago, back in 2012, and said, hey, why don't you take a look at this video? I've done an interview with this Blip Clinic, and they've got some really exciting ideas. And maybe we might use this as for a presentation at CALI because it seems to be really exciting. So I watched the video, and it was the inaugural planning sort of session, basically, with the team under Jonathan Askin and his clinicians to set up the first legal hackathon. You'll see back in 2008 there, if I can, on this time stream, the software that's being advertised downstairs, it's pretty nice, but it doesn't display that well. Unfortunately, I've got a Mac here, so I'm able to kind of zoom the screen a little bit because it's very small. But it's definitely great for getting into detail. And I'm kind of sidestepping a little bit as we talk because I'm the tech educator guy, and I'm sort of trying to introduce a little bit of new technology at the same time. Pretty much as an example of why this is all part of the process is the fact that technology is evolving at such an exponential rate that you wake up the next morning and the world has changed completely. And it's not only the financial crisis that has impacted on the legal profession. Here are some comments made by a bar association director, and these comments pretty much, in my mind, show the impact of technology bringing free services to the world, to consumers who have often been priced out of the ability to get hold of an attorney for their purposes. So it's, you know, from companies like LegalZoom, who have got 2 million supposedly satisfied customers, to CyberSettle, $1.8 billion worth of settlements. Google and LexisNexis getting involved heavily with Rocket Lawyer. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff out there that's making it harder for the traditional model of lawyer firms to go forward. Again, it impacts on how education is taught for lawyers and where a young grad's going to go. I would quickly say that you know, when I was growing up, I had this idea that I was very, very important, and then over time I've come to realize very rapidly that in fact it's all my data that's important, and that is more important for all of us, and increasingly so. And I think that is a lot to do with what's going on with technology and the impact on what's available out there, because you can do data mining for every type of data, whether it's about an individual, when you're trying to gather evidence about a case, whatever it might be, there is this stuff out there. I wanted to just quickly show you the energy of the tech side of tech hacking, because really this whole movement that's been going on out of Brooklyn Law School with the Blip Clinic and the Cube is all about hacking. And it started off with the fact that tech guys were hacking things, and then the lawyers got involved and said, well, why don't we hack too? So I just wanted to take you back to the tech side for a second and show you the video, some energy from some young hackers here.
So what is the secret ingredient? So it is indeed the Shield bot. So this was just released yesterday, and we have the first 10 units of the Shield bot here at the hackathon. Really excited to show them off. And again, thanks again for Steve for sponsoring us with them. To give us these awesome units. So what exactly is the Shield bot? So the Shield bot is an Arduino shield that transforms any Arduino into a robot. So it has eye reflecting sensors for line following, edge detection, has micro gear motors strapped around, battery on board, expansion ports, as well as it is a shield, so you can stack other stuff on it. This is what it looks like from the top. This is a quick overview, as you can see, all the different components. And it's designed to be easy to use, it's plug and play, it's an all-in robot that you just stack on your Arduino and off it runs. So, just quickly, just going over the technical details for everyone, just to prep everyone. There's full documentation online. We'll post the link to the wiki. So you guys can port the documentation, go to the library, and just get familiar with it.
Right, I just wanted to, that guy is just kind of firing off, and there's a lot in that video with other characters getting in there, and they're just going for it. And this is the spirit of the Legal Hackathon too, in Brooklyn, at Brooklyn Law School, with Cube. We've got lots of young, soon-to-be attorneys who are just incredibly motivated and moving in a whole new direction with this entrepreneurship, because the technology is there. If it wasn't for the ability to be able to get out there and grab data, do searches that you wouldn't normally have to go through this incredible burdensome process to get the information, you can do it online through various tools. And you can process it through online tools like Docracy, which is a legal document website. All kinds of stuff that's out there. I'm sure most of you are familiar with at least a few of them. So I'm going to now hand it back to Harold, who's going to start with the introductions. Let me just get back to the main screen here so that we are unshared. Right.
Okay, so obviously Lloyd and I are reporters. And it's really these three folks who are really the movers and the shakers at Brooklyn Law School. In the center is Jonathan Askin, a professor who joined Brooklyn Law School. He's the founder and director of the Brooklyn Law Incubator project. And really, the driving force behind this CUBE project, which has recently come into being. So, and we have joining him, flanking him, Jared Brenner, who's back in Brooklyn, and Tatiana, is it Bokorukov? Do I have that right? Okay.
No.
All right, Tatiana, all right, I'll let you say
Borakova.
Borakova, okay. So we'll hear from the students after we hear from Jonathan, but I think that Jonathan is probably best equipped to talk about the birth, development, and evolution of Blip, and I'll turn. Jonathan's joining us from London. So Jonathan, welcome. Becky.
Thanks, Harold. Thanks, Lloyd. I should start with first a request and a confession. My request to Lloyd and Harold is to shut me up if I go on too long, or refocus me if I go down too many tangents. My confession is that I'm a bit of a historic fraud, but I think my quality, my context as a historic fraud will shed light on my perception of where legal education is going and what we're all trying to do with our various programs at our various schools to try to bring experiential tech law education to our students. About 15 years ago, essentially at the birth of the internet, I tried my first hand at teaching law. And I tried to teach civil rights law, but I realized I was a fraud. I did not know the first thing about civil rights work. I had never really practiced as a civil rights attorney. So I went back to the world. And something else great happened about 15 years ago. The internet happened. Congress passed some rules to try to create an open forum for the internet, at least in America. They passed the Telecommunications Act. I gave up civil rights work. And I saw the great issue of the day being the ability for a young lawyer to leapfrog into the profession to create new laws where nothing ever existed before. To me, this was a moment like we've seen maybe 4 or 5 times in U.S. history, after the American Revolution, after the Civil War, during the New Deal. These are great moments. Maybe the Civil Rights Act of '64, and now 1996, the emergence of the internet and reform in telecommunications. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go experience this and then try to become a technology lawyer. So I lived in DC for a long time, and me and all my friends thought we were technology lawyers. But we really weren't technology lawyers. We were essentially lobbyists who knew some of the terminology that Silicon Valley was throwing at us. A few years later, I left Washington, D.C. and started working with tech startups. Moved to New York, worked in California, worked in Boston, and my colleagues and I all thought we were tech lawyers. But we really also weren't tech lawyers because we really didn't understand the trajectory of policy and politics and how it would affect the new generation of technology startups. So I moved to Brooklyn. And at the time, Brooklyn Law School, I think this was around 2007, the great clinic du jour was the IP clinic. Every law school worth its salt was building an IP clinic. And Brooklyn, like every other law school, wanted to build an IP clinic. I wasn't even an IP attorney, but I essentially sold Brooklyn a bill of goods. I said, yes, I will build you an IP clinic. But to me, IP means much more than intellectual property. To me, IP means internet protocol, it means information policy, it means intellectual property. It also means innovative practice, and I thought it meant incubation and policy. So my objective through the Blip Clinic, the Brooklyn Law Incubator and Policy Clinic, was to train that new generation of tech-oriented lawyer able to work with startups, but with the full spectrum of understanding of what it is to represent a startup. So it means not just knowing the transactional work, not just knowing the litigation issues, not just knowing the policy implications, not just knowing the political trajectory, but knowing it all so you can actually be a well-informed counselor to your startup clients. At the time, it was very interesting. 2007, we saw New York emerging, and no offense to Boston, but New York was now emerging as second only to Silicon Valley in its startup community. And I thought this was a great opportunity to have the students who graduated from law school, from college, to actually represent their former classmates who were now in New York, now in Brooklyn, starting new ventures. And like the traditional marginalized members of society that clinics have historically represented, the startup entrepreneurs, while they may be well educated, did not have sufficient resources and a sufficient support network to support their needs. So we created the Brooklyn Law Incubator and Policy Clinic, and we've been running for about 7+ years. We've represented more than 700 startups, primarily Brooklyn and New York City based, but we've become more global. About 5 years ago, I proposed to the administration, wrote a proposal that we expand BLIP into a bona fide center to give us real resources so that we could turn the law school into a haven, a hub for startup entrepreneurs beyond just legal academics and law students. At the time, my school wasn't particularly interested in devoting any resources to building this sort of center. I went to the White House to speak to the folks at the Office of Science and Tech Policy, who at the time were launching something called the Startup America Partnership. And if you're not familiar with Startup America Partnership, it is now an effort to help raise the level of entrepreneurship throughout multiple regions around the country. At the time, I thought the missing component was meaningful legal support services. And couldn't we create BLIP-like programs through law schools around the country to provide that essential free or low-cost legal support for the burgeoning startup centers outside of 128 corridor, outside of Silicon Valley, outside of New York? The White House, frankly, was a little slow to uptake. And frankly, my school was a little bit shy about revealing what Brooklyn was doing because they were using it as primarily a recruitment tool for new students. So there was some sense that we shouldn't be sharing the idea. Although frankly, it seems to violate the clinical ethos that we've grown up in America, where at least in clinical education, clinics are very willing to share their ideas across law schools. In any case, I went to Europe. And Europe, living under austerity, took the bait. Last year, we got a grant from the European Commission for $650,000 to build BLIP-like clinics at 16 law schools in Europe. In fact, part of the reason I'm here in London is I'm working with the University of London, Queen Mary School of Law, the Center for Commercial Law Studies, as one of our 4 anchors in building out our network of clinics at these law schools to raise the level and quality of the startup community in these 16 burgeoning tech centers in Europe. Feel a little bit unpatriotic. My plan is to prove the concept now in Europe and bring it back to America, where we can actually build out a US-based network around the country with law schools supporting each other's services and not having to reinvent the wheel. A little bit like the Innocence Project, to the extent you're all familiar with that. The Innocence Project, but with a tech overlay, a tech substantive approach, but shared resources among multiple law schools throughout America. So in any case, we finally got a dean last year who comes from tech policy world and sees the value of training law students to understand the trajectory of technology, of politics, of entrepreneurship. So this year we did launch our Center for Urban Business Entrepreneurship. We're functioning ourselves like a startup. We've got roughly $1.5 million. Like any startup, this is our seed funding to get us going for the next couple of years, to prove the process and then go back out to the financial markets to raise more capital for our venture.
Jonathan, if I could just interrupt a second, then just to get some understanding from you about the connection between BLIP and the ultimate creation of Cube. How do they relate to one another? And just for the audience, some that may remember 2 years ago, you joined us in a presentation about the legal hackathon that was held in 2012. So how do those two things relate?
Okay, yes, I'll talk about BLIP to Cube and the legal hackers movement. Those are sort of the 3 important components. Bottom line is, for 7 years, I think I've been running the BLIP clinic like a bona fide center. We run the Brooklyn Entrepreneurship Meetup, the Brooklyn Tech Meetup, the Brooklyn Futurist Meetup. We run multiple meetups as an effort to make Brooklyn Law School a neutral hub for the New York startup community. We are essentially the outsourced general counsel for many of the incubators, co-working spaces, accelerators, and unaffiliated engineering and design schools throughout New York. So we've essentially functioned as a center, but without the resources or the name of a center. CUBE was an effort to actually give us some real teeth, some additional resources, so that we can actually create what is, in fact, a bona fide center. So that's essentially the trajectory from Blip to CUBE. Now, about 2.5, actually, the truth is about 4 years ago, we thought about doing a hackathon. I panicked. I vetted it with a few of my colleagues, and they thought we were criminals. The word hackathon, the word hacker, all they could think of was, black hat hackers doing nefarious deeds online to steal information, etc. The concept of the white hat hacker, a bunch of coders collaborating together to collectively resolve issues, was anathema in legal circles, legal academic circles, at least at my law school. So my students and I would go to hackathons. We'd spend the weekend sitting around like wallflowers at these wonderful events in awe of what the hackers were doing. We'd step in at 6 p.m. on Sunday night after everyone else has been coding for 40 hours, and then we butt them to death. We say, this is a great idea, yeah, but you can't do it because you're violating this law, this regulation, you didn't work out your IP, you don't have any equity relationship among the people who just spent the past 40 hours working on this project. So we'd step in and try to do damage control at last minute. That didn't really make any sense. And we felt like outsiders. So our goal was to make us the center, or at least relevant components, relevant participants in the hackathon movement. So it took me a couple years to get up the nerve to bite the bullet, and it took actually several very inspired students of mine who decided this was worth doing, and it was worth doing at the law school. So our objective, and our first hackathon was really a hackathon on training wheels. It was more like a symposium than a bona fide hackathon. But the bottom line was we were now participants in something that was starting to look like real collaborative work between lawyers and technologists, getting together to collectively, with multiple teams, with a technologist, a designer, a lawyer, a policy person, getting together and trying to spend a weekend resolving a problem. Now, over the past 3 years, the legal hackers movement now has more than a dozen outposts in America. There is now a legal hackers group in London. In fact, they did a legal hackathon here last Saturday while I was up at MIT doing a global hackathon. I thought it was pretty interesting that to have essentially the only sort of world-class university without a law school function as the hub for a legal hackathon. And it was really wonderful. We experimented with a lot of new technology tools that I think we couldn't have done in isolation through a network of law schools. And this hackathon, we post some challenges. If you go to legalhackathon.org, you'll find some information about the challenges we post. Some of these challenges will last a couple weeks, some will last a few months, some will last a year. But the idea is that over the course of the next several weeks, months, and years, we will, together with teams, resolve several issues that require some facility with technology reform, some facility with law reform, and the ability for technologists and lawyers to collaborate together. Now that might be a nice segue over to Jared. I don't know if Harold and Lloyd are ready for that, but Jared was the winner of our first Center for Urban Business Entrepreneurship competition, and it is in fact a project that he's been working on, and we hacked a little bit and spoke with a bit last week at this MIT Legal Hackathon, with Jared actually functioning out of our outpost in Dumbo, and me and some other colleagues up at MIT.
All right. Well, that's terrific. But Jonathan, just before we bring in Jared, tell us about, you said that it was Dean Allard, our new dean at Brooklyn Law School, who agreed to
took the bull by the horns.
Really take the idea of CUBE and make it real. When did the CUBE launch? When did that all start? And can you tell us how that's stacked right now?
We launched about back in November of last year. We're staffing up now. We hired an executive director on January 1st. We have some more resources to hire a few more support staff. And the objective is to bring together several of our clinical offerings under one umbrella. Most of it not, or some of it not technology oriented. Blip was essentially the tech component of the center.
So the curriculum will, do I understand that there'll be some CUBE fellowships and a curriculum is being developed as we speak and will be launched in the fall? Is that correct?
Yeah, well, you're looking at two of our three, well, three and a half, however you count it, two of our CUBE fellows for this upcoming year. They are our first, they are our pioneers. We will live or die on the success of their projects. Not too much pressure there, folks.
Yeah. So now you mentioned this CUBE competition. When did that take place?
The CUBE competition, so it took place on April 3rd was the pitch competition. It was the night before what we were calling our first transatlantic symposium for the center and for Blip. We ran an event called From Bleak House to Geek House, Evolving Law for Entrepreneurial Lawyers. And the night before, we thought this would be a good opportunity for the law students themselves to pitch their ideas before a panel of judges. And you know, it's a precarious situation. Can lawyers be as creative as the startups with whom we work and represent? I was a little nervous. Are people mired in the law day in, day out for 2 years? Do they have the same skill set that technology entrepreneurs have? And I was wildly impressed by the project. So my sense is that the goal of the projects, each of the projects is supposed to pick an area in one of two categories. Find an area in which the law has not kept up with the needs of new ventures, or find a way in which we can use new technology to improve the law or legal process. At least that's what I was hoping.
Let's put it to the test now, and maybe we bring in the winner of the competition, Jared. Jared, tell us about you, Jared. How did you get involved in this?
All right. Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm Jared Brenner. I'm a rising third-year student at Brooklyn Law School. I am currently a member of the Blip Clinic, and of course I'm also a CUBE Fellow. The project that I proposed at the CUBE competition has the working title of the What If Wiki is the name of the project. And essentially what we're trying to do here is support the developing national network of legal hackers that Professor Askin and Lloyd were talking about earlier. We're seeing a surge of activity in the legal community towards supporting entrepreneurial lawyers, toward exploring policy issues at the intersection of unsettled law and emerging technologies and new industries. We're seeing these legal hackers meetup groups pop up in different cities across the country, and it's only going to keep growing. We're seeing new law school clinics that are branded with entrepreneurship and innovation as their stated focus. Even if Blip was the first, there are many others of these popping up nationwide and worldwide. So the purpose of my project, in a sense, is to bring these stakeholders together, but also to document and summarize their public policy discussions in a really accessible way that's friendly to this new breed of lawyer that we're trying to develop, this young-ish, tech-savvy, startup-friendly lawyer. So what we want to do with this project, and I have a team of students who are working on it now. I'll get back to where exactly we are with it in a minute. But the basic purpose of the project is to write encyclopedic articles that are focused on areas where the law needs to be updated or where no law really exists that supports the next generation of startups and, of course, their savvy, awesome lawyers. We basically see two possible benefits of the project. Like I said, it's going to tighten this national network of legal hackers and raise awareness of initiatives that matter to them the most. It's also going to help stop ideas from getting lost in the ether after meetup groups get together and discuss in panel discussions or presentations or hackathons. There's a lot of talk that goes on, and there are a lot of slides that are shown, but they all sort of just disappear. We want to keep everything centralized in one place. We want to keep the discussion going in one place and hopefully build a community. But a second benefit of the project, aside from that tightened network, is the ability of a wiki like this to help people recognize connections between multiple areas of law that might affect the same emerging industry or the same new technology. So one great example of that is, I'm sure you're all familiar with the booming new industry of 3D printing. There are massive legal and regulatory implications there. And I could see a series of articles on the wiki one each for the new industry's impact on, say, criminal law, like 3D printing guns, tort law with product liability issues, and possibly all three areas of of intellectual property law, copyright, trademark, and patent. Not to mention trade secrets and other tangential issues. So the thought that I've had so far in terms of how this wiki is going to be organized and what exactly we're trying to do here at the beginning is to keep everything organized by top-level areas of law rather than the industries that will shape the law. Because the ultimate dream of this project is that if we can build out some encyclopedic articles within these top-level legal areas, we might eventually be able to use the articles to crowdsource new systemic reform proposals. We might be able to collaboratively draft legislation or outline legislation. Maybe drafting is too ambitious. But we want to eventually build a platform where people can comment and vote up and down on ideas for some kind of policy proposal that the National Legal Hackers Network can advocate for. So that's a very lofty goal. This is a very broad and open-ended project that I'm hoping will be an ongoing initiative at Brooklyn Law School that will far surpass my time here. I'm really just trying to get it started. And I don't really see any way for us to lose, because the worst thing that could possibly happen is our team learns about some new policy issues, we go forward being more educated about areas where we can probably find some pretty innovative jobs for ourselves. There's serious professional value to a project like this, even if it's not exactly an entrepreneurial venture in and of itself. It makes us more informed entrepreneur lawyers, entrepreneur-lawyer. That's how I think about it. So where I'm at with this right now is I've got a team of about 10 students. Most of them are rising second-year students, so they're right in the peak of their energy and enthusiasm and willingness to explore new issues. In terms of educational value for them, aside from what I've already mentioned, I think that participation in a project like this could be a great supplement to participation in an academic journal. This is very different from journal membership. It's a lot less structured, a lot less formal, but the writing that we're doing, I think, will be more accessible, will be more straightforward, and will be more likely to be widely read than a lot of the notes that people spend their 2L fall drafting every weekend. I'm hoping that this can be a good supplement to that, or that the articles that my team is working on right now could even inspire later academic writing. So I think there's a lot of different benefits there, and I'm excited to see where it goes. Essentially what we're doing this summer is researching topics to build out a substantive outline of the wiki. I don't want to launch a site until we at least have a core group of articles drafted, so we have some written content to put out there. But the goal is to have a site launched by the end of the school year, so hopefully by this time next year I'll actually have a proof of concept to show you guys. We're working out the top-level structure, we're working out the design, and of course we're looking for as many external collaborators as we can find. So anybody out there who may be watching or listening, whether live or looking at the recording of this session, if you have any interest at all in participating in the project, whether by proposing article ideas, by drafting articles yourself, by connecting us with other law clinics, we are absolutely interested and open to it. We love to collaborate, and I'm excited to move forward. Also happy to answer any questions you guys have. Thank you.
Jared, let me ask you just something from the tech side
Sure.
perspective. I'm just wondering, there's a lot of excitement about what you're doing, and I understand you're very much in the planning process. From a technical perspective, my thought is, well, how are you going to actually implement this with technology, and what sort of technologies might you utilize? Are you thinking to, do you have anyone who's actually a tech guru who has some innovative ideas? There's been so much innovation in this field, with documents like, with the online tools like Docracy, for example, which is, as you know, a very good sort of collaborative tool in developing legal documents. I'm wondering if you're thinking of partnering with a group like that, or doing your own sort of setup, or is this too early yet to decide, how you might?
No, it's not too early. Absolutely, Lloyd. That's a great question. It's something I think about a lot. I think what I can tell you, the answer to your first question, which was, have I figured out the technology or have I thought about it, is yes and no. The yes part of it is that at our meetings, the team is constantly talking about the best way to present this information. I think a wiki can be done in the most bare bones text-based fashion possible, and it could also be presented in a much more radical format. I'm not sure how far afield of the standard, wiki or other wiki template type of style I really want to go, but I'm working to find a designer who can work on a pretty tight budget and is able to come up with a concept that is both readable and suggests that we're interested in innovative designs and innovative ways to present information online. So that's as much as I can tell you at this stage. What I will say, though, is that sites like Docracy, and there's another site out there called casetext.com that participated in the Bleak House Symposium on April 4th. These sites have already started working out ways of voting up and down comments on pieces of law or case law that I think would be very useful if my project gets to the stage that we're actually outlining collaborative and comprehensive reform proposals. There's going to have to be some kind of innovative design there in order to get the whole community working together seamlessly. There will probably also have to be some editorial powers by those in charge of the project that would need to be set up. But that's so far down the road for us that at this moment I'm really just more focused on the substantive content of the site and see how far we can take it before we launch anything.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I could ask you more, but we're kind of at a premium on time, and I want to give Tatiana a chance, the second place winner, to talk about her project. Thank you, Tatiana. Maybe you can expand on your proposal that won second place. So we're asking you just to talk about your proposal.
Sure. Well, so one of the reasons why we really got interested in getting involved with CUBE was because it kind of offers this unique interdisciplinary opportunity to sort of, it's a cross-section of law, entrepreneurship, and also kind of providing social benefits and doing something good to public interest, helping, one of the sort of angles for the CUBE Innovator project that was proposed was to see, what can you create to help society, to help a disadvantaged group, to help solve some sort of a problem. So this was appealing to me and my partner, Pete Patier, because I have a background in real estate. I'm a real estate paralegal, and Peter has public sector experience. So what we really wanted to do was to come up with an idea that would
looks like we're losing you.
We're losing you, Tatiana.
Could I suggest that Tatiana unplug her earbuds, because I think that might be part of the problem.
Give it a shot, Tatiana. Can you try unplugging your earplugs, your earbuds?
Built-in mic.
Tatiana.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Yeah.
Try unplug it from the laptop. No.
Okay, can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah, that's a little better. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, proceed now. Try continuing now, and let's see how that's.
Okay, you can hear me now?
That's actually better. Thanks, Jared. The tech-savvy lawyer.
Okay. Yes. So, for us, basically, what we wanted to do was, given our knowledge of sort of the real estate crisis in New York City and our backgrounds that lend to, how sort of a solution, we're trying to figure out a way how we can help the housing crisis. So SHARE, which stands for Smart Housing Alternatives Through Renovation and Efficiency, we're basically trying to capitalize on the fact that there's a lot of unused housing stock. There is a major vacancy shortage of apartments, affordable apartments, and apartments in general in New York City. And one of the problems is that there's a lot of apartments that are vacant, but they are not in a condition to be rented. So it's just a waste. The city has recently unleashed a very ambitious, very creative plan that's very detailed, and it's long term, about 10 years. And they have their own solutions for how they want to tackle the housing crisis. It's basically geared at preservation and new development. Our plan is actually kind of a microcosm of that in a way, but we're focusing really on the preservation aspect. And what we want to do is take vacant properties that that might have some violations that are owned by landlords, and that basically they only require modest repairs, maybe $10,000 to $40,000, but for those repairs, they would basically have people living in those units. So for one reason or another, these units are vacant. So what we want to do is raise money either through a combination of granting or low interest rate loans, and to offer landlords the funding facilitating the for the landlords. We would ask that they rent properties.
We're losing you again.
Either HPD, people on the HPD waiting list, or otherwise to. Are you having trouble hearing me?
Yes. It's sort of breaking in and out. Keep going. Yeah, just keep trying. We'll just bear with it.
Okay, so basically the idea is that in exchange for the service that we're providing to the landlords in getting their rental properties up and running again, we ask that they rent them out through some affordable housing initiative, whether at a reduced rent rate or to someone on the housing waiting list, or through some other mode that would basically provide somebody who is in need of affordable housing with affordable housing. And what we believe is that this creates a benefit for basically everybody, for the landlords, because they will now have units that are usable and livable, and they will generate rental income for them. It will benefit the city because, one family in one unit at a time, somebody will get housing. And we're basically, reaching for the low-hanging fruit, trying to make small, not very costly repairs, but nevertheless, it is a unit. It is, one small piece of the puzzle to try to make housing a little bit more affordable. And in addition to this, we're looking to use crowdfunding as one of the ways to raise capital for financing these repairs. And this is something that's a bit innovative in the sense that crowdfunding, has recently become very popular as a way for entrepreneurs to raise initial capital for their projects. But we're trying to make it, applied to the notion of real estate. And from the micro point of view, for our pilot portion for our project, we're just trying to raise just enough money so that we could do a modest renovation on one property. The benefit for the crowdfunding is basically just the social benefit. It's altruistic. Participants, are making a difference by contributing. But on a grander scale, if our project is sustainable, this is something that we're exploring if this could be used to provide tax incentives on a larger scale. And so the research involved with that would be quite innovative and involved. But other than the crowdfunding, we're also trying to basically capitalize on how social networking is used, how the new generation of lawyers and just people who are connected in our social circles as a whole, we're very interested in social issues. We're interested in making a positive impact. We're all very connected, and so one of our goals with our project is to create a website and create a news feed and basically put a face and a story to the housing problem in the city, and to basically, I'm sorry, can you not hear me?
I'm good.
You're pretty good, actually.
Okay. What we're trying to do is set up our funding page and let people know that these are the families that we're working with. This is the community that we're working with. We're going to work with existing organizations, with existing policies, with the city, and basically just come in and kind of fill in the small gaps that are not necessarily being filled by existing policies and procedures. And so we basically want to capitalize on the social networkingness of how society communicates today by getting it all out there and really getting people interested and invested in the fact that one project, one renovation, one unit, and one family, we can make a difference with that. So one of the things that that I know you guys would want to hear about is sort of the technical skills and the technology that we would be using for this whole process, other than the social networking aspects that I mentioned. And so really for us, we're still in the exploratory phase, but we are, the big thing is for our research, in order to identify properties that are vacant, properties that have violations, properties in general, we basically have to search through a lot of GIS data, survey data, HP spreadsheets, and the thing is, I mean, New York City is massive. There's, gosh, I don't know, 9 million properties, and the way that the databases are organized on the city level, I mean, they have a lot of information that's difficult to sift through. So one of the features of our project and this research phase will be mining all this data, mining the HPD and the ACRIS documents, and going through them and sort of synthesizing the data that's relevant for our project into a format that's more that's workable and legible for us. And perhaps if we come up with a good model, that's something that will help us proceed with our project in the future. And I mean, the big thing for Share is that it's going to be a really great opportunity to learn, from not only from just the legal point of view of how to repair a property and the contracts that are going to be involved between all the different entities, but it's the social benefit of helping the city, working with nonprofits, working with community-based organizations. It's basically going to be just a massive synergistic.
Okay, Tatiana, I think we're sort of at a premium time. We really have 10 minutes. I just wanted to pitch it back to Jonathan. Jonathan, both of these proposals have a certain amount of risk. We're dealing with entrepreneurship. Each of them can fail miserably or succeed spectacularly. And I guess I wanted to turn that over to you and talk and ask you to sort of sum it up about, and with leaving some time for questions, maybe 5 minutes or so, about what implications the CUBE project and this competition have for legal education in the future.
We're losing. No,
One second.
Here I am. I
Here you
muted it.
Okay.
Harold, you said a horrible phrase, but a wonderful phrase that I think we should discuss. You said either succeed gloriously or fail miserably, something like that. Fail miserably is the term that's probably stuck in the heads of almost every law student out there or every lawyer. That's the dread. It's not really the dread of the startup. I mean, to succeed gloriously is wonderful. To fail miserably is supposed to be anathema, non-existent in the mindset of the startup entrepreneur. It should be to fail gloriously as well. And where in law school do you have the luxury to fail and to fail gloriously? This is that rare moment where there is so much to be learned from failure. What does it mean to fail? I mean, the fact of the matter is 9 out of 10 startups fail. When was the last time you ever heard of a lawyer failing and getting back on their feet? There are no second acts for failed lawyers, is essentially the mantra. So, frankly, I don't mind that much if the students fail as long as they learn and we learn. And they get back up on their feet and try again. That's the difference, I think, between the lawyer and the entrepreneur. The lawyer is so thoughtful, so methodical, so slow because every T has to be crossed, every I has to be dotted. And that's not the way the rest of the world, the tech world, the entrepreneurial world, the political world, well, is moving at this point. So I think what we've got to train lawyers to do is, if you fail, fail fast. Don't let it get you down. Learn from it. In fact, if these students fail, I expect them to write papers on why they failed and how they're not going to fail next time. That's not something we ever teach in law school. So I would essentially snap victory from the jaws of defeat in this scenario. Harold, was there another component to the question?
I guess that just as a wrap-up point is the implications of on legal education of your project.
So for me, the real educational lesson is learning how to. You're not going to hit every mark on this. It's to learn how to think like an entrepreneur, not just like a lawyer. People go to law school for one of several reasons. One of the primary reasons is a risk aversion, the belief that law is going to give you a degree and job security and some level of income for the rest of your career and certain credibility. We don't know if the world's going to operate that way anymore. The students are not going to be graduating to the same extent and going into the law firm for the next 30, 40 years of their career. They're going to have to be much more entrepreneurial. They're going to have to be much more self-directed. They're going to have to figure out what makes them unique. Why are they uniquely situated to pursue this one path? That's the nature of every single startup entrepreneur, and that's never been the nature of any startup, any lawyer coming out of law school. It's always been, you go to law school, you find your career, you stick to it for the next 40 years, and that is it. If we're going to survive, and we're going to survive in the world that's moving even faster, look, the technologists are going to pass us by and never use the lawyer, except for those lawyers who are able and nimble to move as quickly as they are. So if we can teach speed and comfort with failure, then Blip and Cube will have done a great service, I think, to the next generation of lawyers and, frankly, to their clients.
Jonathan, I have one quick question. Is there one technology that you have witnessed just recently, perhaps at your conference in London just now, that stands out as new and innovative in a way that stuff that other things that you've seen recently have not, that may be utilized with either legal education or for lawyers going into the entrepreneurship approach, or in any capacity to do with would-be or existing lawyers?
You know, it's funny, there was another event about a half a mile from where I was cloistered in a hotel all day yesterday with the Internet Society, and I was not allowed to escape to go to the event called Reinvent Law down the road. They were discussing some of those issues. In fact, some of them were former clients and friends of the Blip Clinic. So I'll give you a little history. I mean, 5 years ago, you mentioned Docracy. The Docracy folks were just two technologists, non-lawyers, who were working out of an incubator space in Dumbo. And they came and they wanted legal support from me and the students. My first reaction was, are you freaking kidding me? We're going to help you completely disrupt the legal profession? I don't think so. And then I started to think again, well, it's going to happen. And best to keep our enemies close. So I thought it was important for me and my students to see what Docracy was doing, because Docracy was the first wave of these dramatically disruptive platforms that are going to outsource a lot of legal work. And frankly, now I look back in hindsight as Docracy as sort of, the first shot across the bow, but a blessing in disguise. When I got out of law school, I went to a ridiculously large, law firm where I was mired in discovery for my first year. That's not a good way to get your legal chops, to learn how to be a lawyer. And guess what? Tools like Docracy, all the new legal platforms, are essentially disrupting what it is to be a first-year associate. That's fine. What are we teaching in law school? We're supposed to be teaching, forget about entrepreneurship and risk-taking, we're supposed to be teaching how to do the things that paralegals can't do, secretaries can't do, and the internet will never do. There are some professions where you're always going to be compelled to think creatively in a way that quite likely the internet and digital media and computers can't do for at least many years to come. Subtle, nuanced legal analysis. So the goal is to make sure the law students leapfrog into the profession. Don't worry about the mindless stuff that the internet now can do through platforms like Docracy or Shake Law or Rocket Lawyer or LegalZoom Next Generation. The real issue is how can we take that stuff and give meaningful support for our clients. This should be a blessing in disguise. It should mean that the ridiculous tasks that lawyers have historically had to do are now very cheap and easy to do, and we can step in and do the real analysis that we were supposedly trained to do. So as far as the most disruptive stuff I've seen on my radar, I don't know that I've seen anything that's much more dramatically disruptive in law. There's some good stuff going on with data mining and using metadata and empowering consumers to find cheaper, more credible legal support services. Nothing that is, in my mind, has stuck as sort of the next great black swan in the legal profession. I still look back.
I just wanted to wrap it up because we're coming to the end of the hour, and maybe we have some questions from the audience, or maybe not. If you do, please raise your hand and speak up. Deborah, I'm sure you must have a question. No questions with Deborah.
Let's see. So we've got I don't remember the names of everything. The What If Wiki is going to launch in next year. I wasn't clear from Tatiana's. Is that also something that's happening, or is it not continually under development?
So your question is, are these both projects?
Both, and are there additional projects that are also under development that we can see later? Were all the projects in Hackathon under development, or just?
So Jared, can you address that? Your project is not yet launched, yeah?
That's correct. It won't launch until next year. But at the moment, we're building a plan for our content and establishing article drafting standards. The idea is that students will draft articles during the year as we also build connections with a number of external collaborators. We'll see how far we can take it, but my goal, at least just to put a number on it, was to draft 100 articles by the end of the school year. And when I say articles, I don't mean anything terribly, terribly long, but at least some good substance on 100 topics by the end of the year, and launch a site then. But that's all subject to change.
And how about you, Tatiana? I don't know if you can hear me. Can you?
Yes. So right now, our kind of timeline is that we are in the process. Right now, we're in the process of building our website. We're securing meetings. Basically, right now, we're trying to locate our pilot to launch our crowdfunding campaign sometime in the fall, probably the late fall of this year, and we hope to actually commence the renovation project early next year. So hopefully by next spring, we hope that it will be concluded for the first pilot property.
Let me just ask you, not necessarily, but Jonathan, there are other folk who were involved in the competition. Are those folk continuing to work on their projects regardless of whether they came in first or second place?
Yes. In fact, this summer we're helping to incorporate to IP protection and draft the contracts and equity arrangements for several of the other CUBE applicants. And in fact, we have several students who are graduating this year who, because they are graduating, were not eligible to participate in the CUBE Fellowship, but have actually already launched platforms. We have this group of students didn't even come in the top 3 of our data privacy legal hackathon back in February, but they have launched a platform to come up with a technological DMCA solution for revenge porn, because we're convinced that most of the revenge porn statutes that have been enacted throughout the country are going to be found unconstitutional. So they've brought lawyers and technologists together to create an alternative mechanism to combat revenge porn, and a few other graduating students that are actually launching their ventures, some in lieu of pursuing careers at the law firm.
Okay. So any other questions? Because we've come to the end of the hour. I want to thank Jonathan, Jared, Tatiana, and thank you all for coming.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for everything. Worked, extremely well considering.